Join us in the fight to restore liberty and American exceptionalism. Together, let's make the case that our charters of freedom are worth defending and honoring. Right here is where the great American experiment comes alive. Let's get to work.
Thank you all for coming to our meeting today for Young Americans for Liberty. If you're a student here, hopefully this is our last meeting, so hopefully you can get involved next semester. You can sign up on that sheet, give you information about upcoming meetings and stuff. So our presentation today, our guest speaker is Shane Krauser. He is the director of the American Academy for Constitutional Education, and he is also an adjunct professor at Glendale Community College. In addition, he is also a former prosecutor, a partner with the law firm Davis, Miles, McGuire, Gardner, an author, and a radio talk show host. So please welcome Shane Krauser.
Very good. All right. Well, I guess I need to make sure. Are we good, Aaron? We're good. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here, and I want to spend a little bit of time having a dialogue with you about where it is that our country's going, what the solutions look like, and how we can be involved. And let's just talk about this right up front. What do you see as the most important problems that need to be addressed in America today? What are the biggest problems? Yes, sir.
Our debt and Obamacare.
Our debt and Obamacare. Talk about that. Why do you see that as such a critical problem in America?
Because it's taking money away from our futures.
Okay. So when you're talking about the debt, correct me if I'm wrong, we got about $54,000 on the head of each man, woman, and child in America today. And of course, as we continue to accrue debt, we know that future generations that aren't even born today are going to have to pay for that debt. And there's this thing called the 13th Amendment, maybe we haven't thought about it from this perspective, that prohibits involuntary servitude. Think about that. Sometimes when we think about 13th Amendment, we think about slavery. But it talks in broad terms of involuntary servitude. How is it that future generations that were not a part of the current government that is incurring all of this debt can ultimately be responsible for something like that? I think we need to start thinking about things from a much different perspective, because we have an irresponsible government, at least so it seems, and we've had this irresponsible government for well over 100 years that continues to acquire debt. And as it acquires debt, I think it's rather clear that they're focused on one of two things: elections and re-elections. They're not really concerned about preserving fundamental liberties of the people, or even abiding by the oath, uphold and defend the Constitution. What are some other, I appreciate that. What are some other concerns that you see? Yes?
The number of people we have incarcerated.
And why do you see that as a concern?
Because a lot of them are in prison for reasons that they probably shouldn't be. People are serving a couple of years in jail for things like owning pot.
Okay.
And then they come back out more of a hardened criminal than they were before.
You know, you bring up a great point, and I think we need to start talking about how we gauge the legitimacy of a law. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit about the Constitution, but there really are two irreducible laws through which we can gauge whether or not a law is legitimate or not. For example, think about this. The two irreducible laws are this: don't infringe on the rights of other people, and keep your word. Think about how simple that is. Don't infringe on the rights of other people and keep your word. Don't infringe on the rights of other people is the basis of all criminal and tort law. Keep your word is the basis of all contract law. But yet, what have we done in this country? At the federal level, at the state level, at the local level. We've created laws where individuals, in fact, aren't harming other people. We simply say, well, you know what, they should be behaving this way, so we're going to create a law to force them to behave in ways that the majority agree with. I mean, what is the idea behind the Constitution and the rule of law? What is it to protect against? What is the idea? What this document that we call the rule of law, what is it designed to protect against?
Criminals.
Tyranny.
Tyranny? And let me take it out even a little bit further, maybe something you haven't thought about before. The Constitution is designed to protect against democracy. You ever thought about that before? The Constitution is designed to protect against democracy, mob rule, tyranny of the majority, individuals coming into power and saying, well, I'm doing what the majority want me to do, and if that means running roughshod over the liberties of the people, well, we'll do it. And we see it happening all the time. Happening all the time. What are some of your other concerns?
Second Amendment.
Talk about that.
My home state of New York. I'm ex-military. I have firearms. Most of my firearms that I have in my collection now are illegal in the state of New York. Mm-hmm. They're perfectly legal here. I'm a competition high-power shooter. I shoot on the weekends. Safe environment. I can pass background check. Why take my rights away in my own home state?
Eli, well, how would you respond to that?
Well, I feel like gun control is more about control than it is about guns. Like, I know that a lot of, like Hitler and the president of China and all that stuff, a lot of they do gun control and all that stuff, and they're tyrants. And like I said, I feel like, you know, exactly what somebody else said, that the government's trying to turn more tyrants. And, you know, and I also feel that they should, I'm strong, I like firearms too, and I have firearms, I have CCW and everything. And I feel that we should be allowed to carry everywhere, even in college. I feel that because we're, you know, I showed a video yesterday in my speech class, and we talk about gun control, and there was a bunch of schools in different shootings and massacres, and I told everybody, what do all these schools have in common? They're gun-free, but why are there still guns there? You know, why there's criminals still going to take guns there, and they're still shooting people. Why can't I be there to protect myself?
How do we, both of you make great points, how do we engage a culture that says guns are bad, guns cause crime, guns perpetrate all of these massacres that we see on schools all over the country? How do we respond as a culture, or to a culture that believes those ideas? Any thoughts on this?
Educate them.
How do we educate them on this idea?
Just gun control classes or something like that. It sounds weird, but
Yeah.
you safety classes for kids.
And they need to see the reality of what's out there, because it's not only about guns. Just recently, what is this kid coming? He's got two knives from his
Yes.
house, and he stabbed, what, 24 people with knives? So the problem is not guns, it's the people, and people need to realize that.
Mental health.
Yeah, who said that?
I did.
And what did you say?
Mental health is a big issue.
Yes.
A lot of people just sweep it up underneath the rug, ignore it, and then incidents like that happen.
Yeah.
A lot of times the guns become the front runner for that, because that seems to be the weapon of choice. You take that out, and then you've
Yeah.
still got knives, you've still got bombs. There was the guy that was seriously mentally ill that,
Yeah.
you know, breaks his entire apartment.
Yeah, the arguments that are being made on the other side are misdirected. Right? It's not so much the guns, it's violence that we want to get rid of. How do we get rid of violence? I mean, why aren't we, I mean, we say that every year there are 9,000 to 10,000 murders that take place by way of firearms every year. Why aren't we talking about the 600,000 to 2.5 million occurrences every year where firearms are utilized to protect an individual? We don't hear about those things, but guns save more lives than they take. But we don't talk about those things. And I think that what is very important from my perspective is that we understand that we have to stop fighting the election cycle battle. Don't we do that quite often? I mean, it's 2014. Hey, it's time to roll. We got to make sure we get the right people into office. And then 2016's coming. We got to get the right people in office. I can tell you tonight how we can win every election for the next 100 years. And it's not by fighting the election cycle battle as the first priority. It's by fighting the cultural battle. Because what we're dealing with today, the many ideas that you've all brought out so far, is a product of a culture that has been created over the last 100 years. There can be no question. Right? And we're going to talk about some of those ideas. But when I'm talking about changing the culture, I'm talking having the ability to engage the culture. Think about this for a second. I just want you to think about this argument. And I do this with my students. I teach here on campus. I teach constitutional law, criminal justice. In fact, I've got a few of my students in here with me tonight. But think about this. I'm a utopian pacifist. I'm a utopian pacifist. And I bet if we took a poll, every single one of you, if we talked for a while, you would agree you're a utopian pacifist. You dream of a world of peace and prosperity. Yep. You want there to be no violence. So being a utopian pacifist, I'm willing to give up my firearms. And you are too. Just bear with me for a moment. You are too, but only on one condition. What's that one condition under which you will give up your firearms as a person who is a utopian pacifist?
Nobody else has one.
Criminals disarm first.
Right.
So we're all utopian pacifists. As long as the criminals will disarm first, we'll give up our guns. But there is no such thing as a utopia. A utopia doesn't exist. It exists in a fantasy world. Right? It doesn't exist in reality. And so oftentimes when we're talking about firearms, we're talking about a world that does not exist. We believe by taking away something like a handgun or a rifle or a shotgun is suddenly we're going to see a decrease in violence. I mean, the fact of the matter is that hands and feet, clubs and bats killed more people last year than did rifles and shotguns. What about bathtubs? What about the fact that more children die in bathtubs than die by virtue of a firearm? We're going to ban bathtubs? Right? So these are the arguments. We need to start making these ideas relevant to a culture that see it as nothing more than propaganda coming from both sides. And they're saying, well, what train am I going to jump on? It's talking about liberty and freedom and what that ultimately means. What are other problems that you see? What is the biggest problem? Maybe someone who hasn't chimed in yet. What's the biggest problem in America today? What did you say?
The economy.
The economy, along as we talked about the debt here. It's a big problem. How do we fix these problems that we've been talking about? Education. And I asked him that as well, and I want to ask you, what does that look like?
I guess, yeah, a little bit of this. And I think maybe, to be completely honest, while I love college and whatnot, it really actually starts at the very basic of it.
Yeah. I mean, most of you go to college here, and we're talking about liberty. We're talking about fundamental rights. We're talking about a Declaration of Independence being the why. We're talking about the Constitution being the how. We're talking about a system of government that revolves around a Republican form of government. Are you hearing these ideas on this college campus? No. I've been around the block many times, and I know that these ideas aren't being taught. If you come into my classroom, we're going to talk about it, but what you also hear is the other side being discussed. It's a debate that's being had and allowing individuals to come to their own conclusion. But we see what's going on these college campuses all over the country, is that there's an agenda, if you will. There's a message that an individual, maybe sitting at the front of the class as a professor, who wants to push upon his students as opposed to allowing them to sift through various ideas. And I want to share with you just some things that I do as I've gone on to college campuses, into the Lion's Den, because really, let's be honest, this is not the Lion's Den. We're all very like-minded, maybe with a few exceptions. But for the most part, we're very like-minded. We believe in the idea of more freedom and less government. And we're trying to figure out how we get there. So let me just take you back to, imagine going into an auditorium with 600 students. And this is what they've heard as you go into that auditorium. He believes in the Constitution. He's an advocate of freedom. He must be a crazy guy. You know this. You know this. He's a crazy guy. You know, he's all about yelling and screaming about the border issues and the gun issues, and government's growing too big, and they're coming after our freedoms, and they're pounding on our door. I mean, that's the vision that they have. So how do you, I want you to imagine going into an environment like this, how do we deal with them? And I'm going to pose a question to you that I want you to think about. And I want you to think about, not only does this resonate with you, do you think it would resonate with individuals that don't necessarily see eye to eye with you ideologically? And the question is this: who here wants to be told what to do? Anybody? You know what? None of you want to be told what to do. Who here wants to be left alone?
Yeah.
Everybody, hold on. Is there anybody here who doesn't want to be left alone? Talk about this. I love it. Talk about it.
No, I think that we need a sort of sense of unity and sort of need to be sort of like comfortable with each other and feel like we're not bothered by talking to each other, you know?
Okay. So when you say that you don't want to be left alone, are you also saying that you are okay being told what to do?
No.
Okay. Okay. I just want to be clear. Yeah. What would you say? You raised your hand as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think a bit of oversight to an extent is necessary, but not to the extent that's gotten.
Okay. When those of you that raised your hand and said, I want to be left alone, tell us what you mean. Yes.
Having the NSA stop spying on us.
Okay. All right. Having government stop in really intruding on our fundamental liberties, our right to be left alone.
Our text messages and our Facebook posts and Twitters.
Let's go to this for a second. Let's go to this. Do you remember when Senator Lindsey Graham went on national TV?
And said it was for the spying of Americans' phone calls?
Yes, he went on national TV just after the NSA got caught in the scandal, if you will, of collecting the phone records of millions of Verizon customers. Do you remember what he said on national TV? He said, "I'm not talking to terrorists. I know you're not talking to terrorists. I don't have anything to hide. Therefore, I don't have a problem with the government doing this." Is there anyone here who agrees with that statement? Be honest. Anybody agree? You don't have anything to hide, therefore you have no problem with government intervening. Yes, talk about it. Let's hear it. Okay, very good.
It's a matter of principle.
Okay, well, we'll get there. If you're not doing anything wrong, what's the problem with government stepping in and going after the bad guys, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Who would have, there was another hand back here. Yes, tell us why.
I agree with the same thing.
So, you know, if you were pulled over by the police, and I asked you, do you know why I pulled you over? And you would say, of course not. You would say no, right? And then I would say, you know, I pulled you over because you were going 65 and a 25. Do you have a problem with me going ahead and taking a look in your car? Go ahead. And why not? Or why would you not have a problem?
Because I ain't got nothing to
You ain't got nothing to hide. Very good. Is there anybody who would disagree with that? a couple hands. It's okay to disagree. It's okay. Wow. No going down others' throat. Why? Raise your hand if you disagree with that.
In between, I mean.
Why do you disagree with that?
Because it's his right to go through my stuff. Like, I have nothing to hide, but it's still my stuff, and I don't want him to go through it.
But come on. If you're not doing anything wrong, what's the big deal?
It's my stuff. I don't want him to go through it. It's not his
I mean, only people who refuse a search have things to hide, right? What do you say?
Well, let me search your car.
Yeah.
Right now,
Your car.
I'm the government right now. I'm in the driver's seat. Very good.
If I search my car, can I search your car?
Okay, very good. Yes.
If you could trust the people that were searching, it probably wouldn't be bad. But look at how they've been using things, you know, to go against people like the Tea Party.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know that information that they're gathering, what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
They have no business in my business.
Very good. What would you, Eli? You hold on. Yes.
I agree with this gentleman. It gives them opportunity if they are dirty. It
Right.
gives them an opportunity to put blame on you, even if you are innocent.
Okay.
And also, you shouldn't have to prove your innocence.
Yeah.
If you're an innocent person, you should never have to prove that.
innocent.
Only until they have
Innocent,
proof
guilty.
that you're not innocent should you have to defend yourself.
Very good.
But you
Thank you
shouldn't
for that.
prove your innocence.
Now let's go back for the great rebuttal. What would you say to this? They're saying, wait a second, I have a right to refuse, and simply because I have a right to refuse doesn't mean that you could infer that I'm hiding something.
Well, if I'm not hiding anything to begin with, I guess I have no problem with it because by my refusal, they're just going to suspect something and then that they would have, with suspicion, they would have the right to.
What is your name?
Melody.
Melody. Okay, Melody. Melody, here's a serious question. Serious question. Would you remove the curtains from your home?
I don't have curtains.
No windows? No windows?
I have blinds, but I keep.
Okay, well okay, look at you trying to be slick with me. Would you remove the blinds from your windows, from your bathroom, from your bedroom? Would you do it?
I don't have windows in the bathroom.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
But possibly, but of course not. It just depends.
It depends on what?
What I'm trying to keep away from.
Oh, I see. I see.
But I always keep them open during the day.
You always, but you close them at night? What do you got to hide? What do you have to hide? If you close your windows at night inside your home, you must be hiding something.
Children.
Children? Well, you doing something wrong? Are you doing something wrong? Possibly. And you do have a Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate yourself. Very good. I mean, think about this for just a moment. I disagree fundamentally with the statement made by Senator Graham, which is, I'm not talking to terrorists, you're not talking to terrorists, I don't have anything to hide. Because this sort of thinking says this: the Fourth Amendment is designed to protect those things that are criminal in nature. That's not true, but that's his line of reasoning. That if we got a Fourth Amendment, it's designed to protect those things that are criminal in nature. What the Fourth Amendment is really designed to protect is, just as you outlined a moment ago, it's the ability to control information, to decide when I want to disclose information, when I want to open my window, and when I want to shut my window, when I want to let someone come into my car, and when I want to refuse them entry into my car or my home. It's the ability to control information. And so when we go back to that question, I think this is an important question when we're talking about liberty. Do we want to be left alone? If the answer that we all have, and I think there's, for the most part, I believe there's a consensus here. I don't think anybody raised their hand and said, no, I want someone to watch everything that I do, and I want them to tell me what to do, and I want them to tell me how to live my life, and when to go to school, and when to go to the bathroom, and what I can eat. Right? Nobody wants to live that life. It doesn't matter where you even stand politically. Think about that for a moment. It doesn't matter what party you're a member of. It doesn't matter. Most human beings this resonates with. And so we're spending all of our time in America right now fighting the election cycle battle, talking party politics, when this is the real issue right here. I want to be left alone. And if the issue is that most Americans want to be left alone, what system of government best allows individuals to be left alone? Is the Constitution really the answer that can help us get there? Is the Constitution being abused? Those are questions that we have to answer. Yes. Yeah, you say yes. You say yes. Another question, think about this. Who here believes that government should have to follow the rules?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Is there anyone here who believes that government shouldn't have to follow the rules? Now think about the answer to that question, and think about what it is I posed up front. There's an election cycle battle going on over here, and over here there's a cultural battle going on. And we know that if we continue to fight the election cycle battle, we just see a change in rank every 2, 4, 6 years. Because we know how this battle is won, right? When you have a citizenry that is largely uneducated and uninformed, they are misinformed. Why is it that we run ads 2 weeks before the election? Why do politicians do that? Because they know they're speaking to an uninformed, misinformed citizenry. And they can convince them 2 weeks before the election about some idea that sounds grandiose and great. I'm going to get their vote. So when I'm talking about winning elections for the next 100 years, I'm talking about changing the way people think about liberty, freedom, the Constitution, small government. That's what we're talking about. And so when we talk about government and rules, this resonates among both sides, right? And when I say both sides, because it's a two-party system to a large degree. But both sides agree that government should have to follow the rules. In all of the college campuses that I've been on, I cannot remember one time when I've had a student raise their hand and say, government shouldn't have to follow the rules. Never has happened. This may be the first day. I don't think it is. But so people in our culture believe government should have to follow the rules. Tell me, why do you believe government should have to follow the rules? Tell me why. Why do you believe that just almost instinctively?
There's a natural order of things. The natural order is organization.
Very good. Yes.
Well, if by law I can own a house or I can own a business, and if the government doesn't follow the law, they can come take my house. They can come take my business. They have to follow the law.
Yeah. Right. And yeah, let's kind of brainstorm here and then we'll come back to this. Yes.
The government is the one that's making a lot of the laws, or all of the laws anyway. And what do you teach your kids? Do as I do, not as I say.
Right.
And what the government's trying to do now is do as I say, not as I do. Because they're not following the law.
Why do we allow this in America. I mean, we all just agreed, and I'm telling you that 98% at least of the American population would buy into these two ideas. And yet, what do? We create these factions that divide us instead of saying, how do we come together to make sure that we are left alone and that government does follow the rules? We don't want to have this discussion because this is the tough discussion to have. What are we really getting at? What is the rule book? What's the rule book? If government should have to follow the rules, what's the rule book? The Constitution?
The Bible and the Constitution.
The Constitution, okay, the Constitution.
The first
Yeah.
5 Bibles of the first 5 books of the Bible
Okay.
were based on the Constitution, were they not?
There are many, yeah, they're absolutely,
10 Commandments were part of the foundational.
there are many components of the way government was set up that are reflected in our government. I think there's little question about that. But what does the rule book say? Compare that versus what is being done in government today that disturbs you. Give me an example of where government, from your perspective, has gone too far. Yes?
Eavesdropping.
Eavesdropping.
NSA, they can eavesdrop on us,
Okay.
but we can't eavesdrop on their neighbor.
Where in the rule book, so here we go. Where in the rule book does it say no eavesdropping?
One of the penal law, criminal penal law.
No, in the main rule book. In the main rule book, the Constitution, does it say anything about no eavesdropping?
Not to my knowledge.
It does. It does. Emphatically, it does. You got the answer this time?
I'm just saying, I have a question. If they can look up our phone records and all this other stuff, why haven't they really located the plane?
Why do you have to throw a curveball into this?
Well, we're on the same subject.
I want to go back to the rule book for just a moment.
Who says they actually want to? Who says they actually want to find out?
Yeah, that's true too. Hey, come on, we got to go back to the rule book. Where does the rule book say no eavesdropping? What did you say? What does the Fourth Amendment say?
Something about unlawful righteous search and seizure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No unreasonable searches and seizures, and no searches can take place, or at least no warrant can be executed without what? Probable cause. No warrant can be executed without probable cause. In other words, the Fourth Amendment, which by the way I think is probably my favorite, it's the right to be left alone. It says government can't come in and just intrude on your property, on your person, your papers, your effects. That's what it tells us. It's protected. So why aren't we standing up and saying, no more, the rule book says this? It's because oftentimes we get involved in these political battles and say, I'm willing to compromise my liberties away. And we live in a culture today that, from the government's perspective, is willing to take a lot of free stuff. Free stuff. And so when you're talking about liberty, being able to live your life the way that you want to live your life, versus being offered free stuff, what's human nature? Human nature will take free stuff. If it means that I don't have to necessarily work as hard, and government is offering an incentive, I will oftentimes compromise my liberties away in order to take free stuff. So think about this. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Ginsburg, otherwise known as Darth Vader Ginsburg, all right, sits on the U.S. Supreme Court. A couple years ago, she had this conversation about the Egyptian constitution. And during the course of this interview, she was asked, what constitution should Egypt look to in putting together their own constitution? Does anybody remember what Justice Ginsburg said? She said, I wouldn't look to the American Constitution because it's too old. It's 225 years old. It's too old. And she said, Egypt should look to the South African Constitution. Now, has anybody read the South African Constitution? Well, let me tell you a little bit about what it says. The South African Constitution, if you look at their equivalent of their Bill of Rights, it says this. Individual has a right to food. Individual has a right to water. Individual has a right to housing. Individual has a right to health care. And the list goes on and on and on. What's the problem with that? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for it? In other words, in order to provide those liberties, which they're not liberties, in order to provide those things, what has to happen? You have to take somebody else's property to provide that for them. It's the same thing with healthcare today. In order to provide somebody with health care, what has to happen? You have to take away from some individuals in order to provide that to another. It's called stealing. It's theft. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. It's government not playing by the rules.
That's unpatriotic.
That's un-American. That's un-American, right? And so the rule book talks about no eavesdropping. What else does the rule book say? Or maybe asked a different way, what else is going on in this country where you would say, I have a hunch government's not playing by the rules here? Yes?
Freedom of speech gets infringed upon on schools all the time.
Yeah, give an example.
On this particular school, there's a teacher that works on this campus who they tried to fire him, and they made him go on leave, unpaid leave, from his job for invoking his freedom of speech.
Do you remember what it was that he was talking about at all?
Well, there was multiple instances with this particular person, but one of them was he shared an email sharing George Washington's Thanksgiving Day address. And there was people that were affected by that and they almost got him fired, and then he contacted fire and they came to the rescue. But yeah, that's pretty strange.
Yeah. I mean, we see the First Amendment being attacked all the time. But what does the First Amendment say? What does the rule book say about speech? It says Congress shall make what? No law. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. And yet it happens all the time. We abridge the freedom of speech. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We talk about not abridging the free exercise of religion, and yet it happens all the time. Not infringing on the right of the people to peaceably assemble, yet it happens all the time. The right of the people to be left alone. We can talk about all kinds of unalienable rights, fundamental liberties, and yet we have a government that oftentimes doesn't play by the rules. And why is it that you think that government doesn't play by the rules?
Because they can get away with it.
Why can they get away with it?
Because people don't really care.
Okay, people don't care.
Well, like involved enough.
Okay.
Apathy.
Apathy. That, from my perspective, that is the biggest problem in America today.
I think a lot of it, though, is that the American people feel as though they're kind of like the stepchildren to the government, because even if we don't want something to go through,
Yes.
they turn around and put it through anyway.
Yes.
So what was the point?
Right. Yeah. And that's a great point, is that you have an apathetic people that allow government to slide oftentimes, right? The price of apathy towards public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. Plato. That's exactly right. And how do you correct that problem? How do you restore a constitutional republic? It's very simple, kind of. Thomas Jefferson said this: educate the people, and tyranny will vanish like evil spirits at the break of dawn. Benjamin Franklin said, it is in the region of ignorance that tyranny begins. In other words, you can only have a free people when you have a citizenry that is engaged, in power, courageous, informed. Right. That's the only way that you can live as a free people. And when you have an apathetic people that kind of just live and let live, and they don't know what's going on, they don't understand the rule book, again, they will elect individuals that don't understand those ideas either. And it's just one big vicious cycle. What has happened over the last 100 years that has caused tyranny to set in? I think tyranny in some very serious ways. I want to talk about that in just a moment. But I want to address the third question just briefly here. The third question: who here wants to keep the fruits of your labor? Yeah. Who here wants to keep what you earn? Most Americans want to keep what they earn. Most human beings want to keep what they earn. And I will tell you this. This is the only question that I've already oftentimes gotten some kickback on. No, I don't want to keep the fruits of all my labor. You don't need $200,000 a year. You don't need to make $2 million. That's too much money. $2 million a year. Okay, so there are some Americans that might resist this. But when you ask them to throw out their own money on the table, to throw out their own iPod, their own iPad, their computers, you don't need to drive a Mercedes. Scale that down and drive a 1976 Chevy Chevette.
All the sports figures, come on now.
Yeah, what are they doing making all that money? Right. So the idea sounds pretty cool until you start telling people, you put your money where your mouth is. And nobody will do it. No one's ever taken me up on this till this day. In the last 10 years, hasn't happened one time. Why? Because they don't believe that. They don't believe in this idea of socialism. That, you know, at $200,000 is a little bit too much. You really don't need that much. Okay, then throw your own money up here. Throw your own property. Well, why won't they take you up on the offer? Because they're really not what I would call a socialist. They don't believe that. Deep down, they are interested in keeping the fruits of their labor. But when you start talking about them recognizing that it's their property being taken, their money, it's a different story. Most Americans believe this. Most human beings believe this. And this is how you start to engage a culture that doesn't quite understand. So think about this. Our Constitution is founded upon two immovable pillars. Men and women are born free, and men and women with power cannot be trusted. Isn't that the essence of our Constitution? Men and women are born free, and men and women with power cannot be trusted. Why do you think we have a Constitution that limits power? We don't have a Constitution that says, government, you get to do whatever you want. If that was the case, you wouldn't even need a Constitution. You have a Constitution that limits what government can do.
There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Unless you come to the Young Americans for Liberty.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. So, I want you to think about this for a moment. This is important. Men and women are born free, and men and women with power cannot be trusted. Well, what are we fighting against then? If we believe that, what are we fighting against? Here's what we're fighting against. We're fighting against a philosophy that says men and women are not born free and can only be liberated by government, and men and women with power can be trusted. It's being turned on its head, and I can prove it. It started with really in the late 1800s, in the early 1900s, with a guy by the name of Woodrow Wilson. Does that name ring a bell? Woodrow Wilson, one of the most powerful men in the world in the early 1900s as president. And he was the man who said, if you want to understand the Declaration of Independence, don't read the preface. Well, what in the world is the preface of the Declaration of Independence? The preface is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among those being life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. He said, if you want to understand that document, remove the preface. Well, if you remove the preface, what's left in that declaration? 27 grievances. Yep. And he says, you know what? In 1913 and 1910, we're just as free as those old dead white men were. We're just as free. We can decide how we're going to deal with our problems. And he said this, we are not bound by the words of the founders. So my question is this, when he became the president and he took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, what Constitution was he defending? Because he was the one who said, we're not bound by their words. We've got grievances here in 1913 that we've got to deal with. How we deal with them. And then he said this, you may say that men and women are born free, but deep down in your heart you know they are not. Do you see, what did I just tell you a moment ago is one of the primary pillars of our Constitution. Men and women are born free. And now you have this philosophy kicking into American politics saying, men and women, you may say that. It sounds like a good idea, but deep down in your heart you know that men and women aren't free. Only government can liberate men and women. So the argument goes. Do you believe that? Do you believe that it's only government that can liberate men and women? No. Well, this is what FDR said. FDR was the one who said, necessitous men are not born free. And we have an administration today that says, you didn't get there on your own. Right. You didn't build that. Think about that for a moment. It's turning the very idea of the Declaration and our Constitution on its head. It's saying that only individuals can be liberated by government. So I want you to consider this. Today you're going to leave the campus at some point. Some of you got class with me. We're going to be hanging out together till 10 o'clock tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. But at some point, you will all leave this campus. And when I leave here tonight, I know exactly where I'm going to go. I'm going to take a right, a left, and another right. And if you were to ask me, why am I going to make those decisions tonight? I would tell you, because I'm free to decide how I'm going to get home. I'm free. Well, this idea that the other side that says men and women are not born free says this. No, Shane, actually the reason why you are going to turn right, left, and then make another right is because, metaphorically, you are enslaved. You're enslaved. You have an addiction. You don't have enough food on the table. You don't have health care. You don't have adequate housing. And that's why you make the decisions that you make in your life. And the only way that you can stop making those decisions is if government intervenes to liberate you. So you don't have enough food on the table, government will give you food stamps. You don't have adequate housing, government will provide you with adequate housing. You don't have health care, government will steal from some in order to give to you. They'll provide it. See, this is a philosophy that's being, again, turned on its head. That Declaration of Independence is the why, the Constitution is the how. If you destroy the Declaration of Independence, the idea that men and women are born free, you can make the Constitution anything that you want it to become. Yes?
Well, as I'm sitting here listening to all of this, I listened to it before, but all of a sudden my brain really kicked in. All of this that you just got done saying, it answers the question, why do we let the government take over and do everything that they're doing to us? Because as from way back, however far it started, the schools and the kids were not being taught correctly. So naturally they grew up and then they started teaching their kids incorrectly. The generations have been taught incorrectly over and over. I went to school, we had civics, we had economics. You guys don't. Most of you probably in here didn't have that.
How many people have two parents at the house?
Yeah, how many people have two parents at the house? How many people are taught that you, as a free individual, you're a youngster, you're going to do what I say because I'm your parent, not what the government told you to do. Because I'm telling you I'm your parent. Not that you can sue me because I'm your parent, because I said, no, you can't go to the movies. This is what's been going on. And because that generation is now turning into my daughter's generation and turning into generations after that one, this is why we are letting the government take us all over and do whatever in God's name they want, because we think they're allowed. We think we have no rights. I'm done.
So will you tell us really what you think? Well, yeah, this is a great point. Who here has taken constitutional law with me? Who here has taken it with me?
I don't know.
That's good.
And you have. Why are you putting your hand down? What, you ashamed? You ashamed? He didn't take it. I didn't take it with that guy. He's a clown. You both of you remember, on the first day of class, I ask the very same question every single semester. Where do our liberties come from? The overwhelming majority of the students on the first day of class give one of two answers. Government, the Constitution. Both of those are wrong. Why is it that when you talk with your average grade school kid in a public school, he will tell you that liberties come from government? It's a cultural battle that started over 100 years ago. And the way you change the culture is by changing the message. And you infiltrate the media, TV and radio. You take back the schools. You take back the internet. You take back blogging. You take back newspapers. You take back magazines. You take back those things that ultimately influence the culture. So if you want to see a change in America, like I said, I told you at the very beginning, I can tell you how to win elections for the next 100 years. Engage in this battle. It's going to be a lot of work, though. And this isn't something that you change in 2 years, 4 years, or even 10 years. This was something we're now experiencing the consequences of 100 years of infiltrating the culture with ideas that are antithetical to what America was founded upon. Absolutely antithetical, not only to the general idea of America, but more fundamentally to freedom, liberty, and why we have small government. So I want to, before I close, I don't know that I have a lot of time here, I want to just show you something going back to government rules. I want to show you how powerful this is, because I'm a strong believer that the way that you change the culture is you have to engage the culture. And what I mean by engage the culture, you have to start talking to people. You have to be involved, whether that's on Facebook, whether that's blogging, whatever that may be from your perspective. In the classroom, dealing with other students, engaging your professor, whatever that may be. These things have to happen. We have to start having this discussion. And this right here, government has to follow the rules. Well, what is the rule book? I want to just give you a brief synopsis of what this looks like. How many articles are in the Constitution? How many articles? Oh, no, you guys better not ever miss this again. Articles. The body of the Constitution has how many articles? 7 articles. 7 articles. How many amendments?
27.
27. Anybody want to go higher or lower?
32.
32. Anybody want to go higher or lower? Anybody? I had one of my students about 3 years ago say 135. Anybody want to go higher or lower? 27 amendments. The Constitution's the rule book. The Constitution doesn't give you any liberties. The Constitution, a piece of paper can't give you freedom. A piece of paper can put government on notice as to those liberties that they have to stay away from. So what does this look like? I'm going to give you just something I think is pretty powerful. Does anybody know what Article 1 speaks to? What branch of government does Article 1 speak to?
Free speech?
No, that's the First Amendment.
Legislative.
Legislative branch. What does that mean? It means all of the power that the legislative branch has is, for the most part, found in Article 1. So, what is the responsibility of the legislative branch? What's their job?
Make laws.
Make laws. Can they create any law that they want?
No.
Well, what laws are they allowed to create?
Within the boundaries of the Constitution.
Within the boundaries of the Constitution. Does anybody know where in Article 1 the enumerated powers of Congress are found? Section 8. Does anybody know how many clauses are in Section 8? Article 1, Section 8? There are 17 clauses, which essentially means that for government to legislate, they must conform with the 17 clauses found in Article 1, Section 8. Okay? So you've thought about this. Now let me ask you this. There was a recent State of the Union address in January. And by the way, so I'm talking about this administration. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter whether there's an R behind the name or a D behind the name. Okay, they're all involved in the problem. Okay, but I'm using this just as an example here. The president got up and delivered his State of the Union and said this: I want to work with Congress, but if they will not work with me, I will move unilaterally. Do you remember anybody hear that?
Act without Congress.
I will act without Congress. I will move unilaterally. Does anybody remember what happened after that statement was made? He got up and clapped. He got a standing ovation. Who did he get a standing ovation by?
His party.
The legislative branch. Here's what happened. The chief executive says, if Congress will not work with me, I will bypass their authority and make the law myself. One man. I will make the law myself. And you had individuals in the legislative branch who gave him a standing ovation as if to say, I am okay with you stealing my authority. I am okay with you bypassing the Constitution if that's what you have to do to accomplish your agenda. I'm okay with it. Did anybody happen to read Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution? Here's what it says. Rule book. All legislative powers herein granted are vested in the Congress, which is made up of the House and the Senate. Did I miss a word? It said all. All legislative powers. See, so this is not an R or D issue. This is an issue of individuals in government not following the rules. It says all legislative powers, not some legislative powers are vested or a few legislative powers are vested. It says all legislative powers are vested. In other words, executive branch, you have no power to make law. Judicial branch, you have no power to make law. And yet we say in America we want government to follow the rules. But yet a few days later, a congresswoman did what? Put together what is called the Full Employment Caucus for one purpose: to create executive orders for the president to sign. You can't do that. You don't have the authority to do that. There's a process that Article 1 says you have to go through in order to create a law. And it's not one congressman or congresswoman putting together a piece of paper and say, President, come on over and sign this. That's in violation of the rule book. You can't do that. And so now think about this. Article 2. Does anybody know what Article 2 speaks to? Executive branch. In other words, all of the power and authority that the executive has, for the most part, is found in Article 2. And does anybody know what Article 3 speaks to? Judicial. Here's what I want you to memorize here. LEJ. This is powerful. Because if you have people that believe that government should follow the rules, Articles 1 through 3 outline the rule book. So my question ultimately becomes, when I'm talking with somebody, whether it's a student, whether it's a colleague of mine, it doesn't matter. And we're talking about what it is that Congress is trying to do. My question is, well, wait a second. Congress wants to do A, B, and C. Tell me where in Article 1 they have the authority to do that. Oh, the president's trying to do this. Tell me where in Article 2 he has the power to do that. Oh, the judicial branch wants to hear this type of case. Tell me where in Article 3 they have the authority to do that. That's the rule book. And yet what we become is a very apathetic people that have looked away from the rule book and said, what have you done for me lately? What have you given me lately? I know I think we're about out of time, but any questions at all before I close it up? Yes?
The government does have police power, however, and there are people who've been punished and sent to jail when they resisted what the government wanted to do. And furthermore, the judiciary's found it very well. The legislative branches had trouble showing they had standing to even go to the judiciary to call into question some of the things that the president has chosen to do. Aren't these kind of unique and beyond the usual? And to just say people are apathetic is maybe estimating
here's
resistance they're going to meet?
That's a great point. I think what I would say to that is a few things. I refuse to buy into the idea that the executive branch, the legislative branch, and judicial branch is the problem. They are symptoms of the greater problem. We, the people, are the problem. We created these issues. If you buy into the idea of popular sovereignty, that's power in the people, you must also buy into the idea that we created the problem. The good news, though, is that if we created the problem, we can also fix the problem. So we have individuals here in the legislative branch that are letting, as you just said, the executive branch do certain things. And they're not contesting it. And they're having problems contesting this in the courts as well. The problem is, for them, is that there are other remedies that aren't being evaluated and looked at and utilized. There are things that can be done. But, after going back to what happened at the State of the Union address, my question is, why was there nobody in the congressional well on the following day yelling and screaming, ranting and raving about what just happened? Nobody did that.
There was a congressman who told the president he lied about something during the State of the Union address.
Well, I understand there's some of that going on. But you know what? There's power in taking to the congressional well and filibustering whatever it may be, in talking about ideas. They have the ability to do those things to create exposure for what's going on. The fact of the matter is that most Americans didn't even understand what it was that people were applauding. They had no idea what the significance of that standing ovation. They had no idea what the rule book even said. And so what I'm saying is that the only way that you correct the legislative branch, executive branch, and judicial branch is by first educating the people as to what the rule book is. You can't hold people accountable if the citizenry don't understand what the rules are in the first place. It's impossible. It can't happen. It's a crapshoot. So with that being said, let me I'll close with this. First of all, thank you for having me. Number two, I look forward to working with Gage. We'd love to come back next semester, and we'll bring all of my students from both classes. We'll be here. We'll make that happen because this is a great club. For those of you that are going to be here next semester, I encourage you to be involved in Young Americans for Liberty. Come together. You're meeting once a month, starting again in September?
Yes, September, yeah.
Coming together once a month to talk about ideas, to talk about how you can have an impact on the campus. I think I've illustrated rather clearly that the good ideas, the best ideas are on our side. And that those best ideas are grounded in the great American experiment. And remember, we're not talking about America, the geographic location. This isn't about nationalistic pride. This is about America, the idea. So when we talk about spreading freedom, what are we talking about? We're talking about spreading freedom throughout all the world. We want others to experience the idea that they can live their lives how they want to live their lives. And really my final comment to you is this. We have one shot at this, ultimately, at the end of the day. We have one shot to be involved in the fight for liberty. I often think of Nathan Hale. Nathan Hale was the man who was captured by the British. And he was the man who was given an ultimatum. If you go back and spy on the Continental Army and bring back information, we'll save your life. He refused to do it. He said, I will not do that. And they hanged him for it. And he said, I regret that I have only one life to live for my country, or to give for my country. Only one life to give for my country. And I feel the same way. Freedom is under attack. The rule of law is under attack. The Constitution is under attack. And if you're going to wait until a specific freedom that you're interested in is attacked, there's going to be nobody left. We've got to stand up with others who are being attacked, where their liberties are being attacked, to really have an impact. It's coming arm to arm, walking lockstep, and trying to defend the idea of freedom, not just for us, but for future generations to come. Thank you all so much for having me.